Welcome to the Women's Football Show here on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel. I'm Kerry Pollock, joined with Allison McConnell, and our special guest this week is Livingston striker slash midfielder Jen Dodds. Jen, thank you very much for joining us here today. Let's have a look at the results from the weekend. In the Capital City Cup, it was Hibs 2, Hearts 1, Hamilton 0, Celtic 5, Glasgow City 0, Rangers 2, Aberdeen 2, Spartans 1, Dundee United 0, Thistle 1 and Montrose 1, Motherwell 1. It's a big gap now, Allison, between Rangers and Glasgow City.
Yeah, 11 points, and obviously you'd have to qualify that by saying that Leanne Ross's side still have a game in hand, but I think the danger now is that they become marooned from Rangers and Celtic at the top, just a point between those two. Fran Alonso's side lost to Rangers. Rangers are the only unbeaten team now in the league, and those two have really seemed to set a pace. This term, I think there'll be big question marks about now whether or not Glasgow City can keep pace. I think it's maybe too premature to write them off just yet, but I do think that there have been definite chinks in the armour this season.
Yeah, Jen, can they close the gap, do you feel?
Not sure, to be honest. Like, they seem to be struggling for a bit of consistency, and you feel that the Rangers score didn't really come as much of a surprise, either given the form of Rangers and City at the minute.
Yeah.
But there's still a long way to go, so we'll see what happens.
Yes, very true. Well, let's have a look to see what the City boss Leanne Ross had to say after that result.
I don't think anybody is panicked. We always just look at games in isolation, and next one, you need to go and win 3 points, just the same as whether we win, lose or draw today. So we've still got a number of games left in the season. It's a long, tough season, and I'm sure there'll be twists and turns still to come.
Yeah, not time to panic yet, Allison, but if that gap remains until after Christmas, after the New Year, is that when it gets time to sweat a little bit?
Yeah, I think I understand where Leanne's coming from. I think it's very important not to overreact, and I think you saw last term that Glasgow City watched an 8-point lead diminish in the closing weeks of the season and still held on to go and win the title. I think there is a resolve there. I think they've got a lot of experienced characters, the likes of Hayley Lauder, who are in there. But I do think that this season they have looked that there has been signs of weakness that you've maybe not seen repeatedly, and I think particularly for me in the final third, I think they just look a bit toothless at times in games. They just lack a wee bit of menace. I think it took until the 96th minute yesterday before they managed a shot on target. Nothing really to trouble Rangers at all. And I think that would be a real concern going forward. And Brenna Lavera picked up a knee injury yesterday. She had to hobble out. I don't think they can afford to lose anyone up front at all. And the couple of draws that they've had, that draw against Hearts a few weeks back through at the Oriam, I think just highlighted the fact that they struggle sometimes for goals, even though they've been fairly making chances and dominant in games. Sometimes you see that they're really struggling to be clinical.
Yeah, Jen, is this where the experience is really going to need to kick in for City?
Yeah, they've been through it before many times. Players been there for a while, so they know how to win leagues and bounce back from tough times. So you wouldn't be shocked if they managed to bounce back, but like Allison says, you need to find that clinical edge that Rangers and Celtic seem to have at the minute.
And you still think that they've got. I think the games between the top three are still pivotal. I think they still have the opportunity to go and shape the title. But what you would say is that Glasgow City haven't taken points off either of those big two this term. Celtic put them out at the Sky Sports Cup in the quarter-final stage last Friday night, 3-0. That's the 5th successive time that Celtic have beat Glasgow City across recent games. Have not taken points off Rangers. They drew with Rangers in that first game in the opening weeks of the campaign, but they've not beaten Celtic or Rangers this term, and I think that would be where you think the league could be won or lost.
Well, Rangers do have that 11-point lead. Let's hear what Joe Potter had to say after that victory.
Yeah, it's different to what they've had, especially coming off the back of last season, but that's something that, if you want to be winners, you've got to accept that pressure. We've got to know what that looks like. We've got to know how that feels, and we've got to take it on board and try and thrive under that pressure. There becomes a moment where, you either take it or you don't. And at the moment in time, we're taking it. I'm sure there'll become a few rocky moments along the way, which you do expect. No season's perfect, but for at the moment, we're looking good. They're playing really well, and that was a top performance.
Jen, what we see in the men's game is for the last few decades Celtic and Rangers have dominated. Is it too early to say that this season in the women's game it might look like that with those two running ahead?
You do kind of see it. Obviously, a lot of money's being pumped into both clubs, so they're able to bring in better quality players. So it is hard for other teams to compete when these clubs are full-time. Like you've got Hibs and Hearts full-time as well, but the amount of money that Rangers and Celtic have is so much more than Hearts and Hibs, and then other clubs in that league as well. And the attraction of like Champions League at the start of the season draws players in too, so it's going to be hard for the teams to compete.
Yeah, Allison, is that maybe a difficulty as well for City, or that they do have quite a big budget? Can we look at that as a reason for them to be falling behind?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think the optics just now would suggest it's perhaps going to mirror the men's game where you've got two big dominant teams. But what you would have to say is that Glasgow City's budget would be on a par. It would be comparable to Celtic's and Rangers. I think Rangers have the highest budget in the league, but I think there's not much between Glasgow and City and Celtic. And in actual fact, I think Glasgow City's budget is marginally higher than Celtic. So when you look at resources, I think they should be keeping pace with the other two. You know, there shouldn't be such a chasm there, and I think they recruited fairly well over the summer. I think they brought players in. I think Glasgow City are a very well run club. They're an independent club. They attract players too on the basis of what they have to offer. They've got a very unique selling point in that they're one of the very few clubs in European football that aren't affiliated to a men's side. But I think in terms of resources, they do very well to compete with Celtic and Rangers in terms of budget. So although the optics would suggest that you're seeing two big teams now pulling away and two teams that we've seen dominating Scottish football on the men's side, I think Glasgow City have the resources to be keeping pace.
Yeah, well, that was the top three. In fourth place, Allison, we have Partick Thistle. Brian Graham will be delighted with those two results, going up to Aberdeen midweek at night with half a team essentially, getting the victory there, and then of course a win over Dundee United.
I think he'll be thrilled. I think they're punching above their weight considerably this season. When you look at their resources, you look at the fact they've got a squad of players, now correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think any are on professional contracts. So you have players who are out juggling work commitments and shift commitments, as he explained to us, with playing football. I think that's been a remarkable return this weekend. Part of me thinks it's almost the world feels as though it's against you and you're going out to give two fingers up to the scheduling of the league. So to go up to Aberdeen for that midweek game and, you know, players unable to get off fire shifts and teaching commitments and then having to go back up to Dundee again on Sunday, I think he will be delighted to come out of that with all 6 points, and fourth place for Partick Thistle is remarkable.
Yeah, Jen, you are in a particularly unique situation because you're also involved in the men's game, working in the PR situation. How do you find that balance?
It's tough sometimes, like when you've been sat all day working and then to go to training. It can be difficult, like to fit your dinner in, even make sure you're fueled properly and hydrated. It's a difficult balance, and then so I'll start work maybe getting at 8:30, and then often I'm not getting home until 10 o'clock, so it's a long day. But yeah, you just kind of have to get on with it, really.
Do you feel like you live at the Tony Macaroni Arena sometimes?
I'll try and go home between work and training for my dinner sometimes just to get away, but it's tough. But
yeah, you go on with it. Not many players play on either side of the fence. Is there anything that surprised you about the PR side of the game?
God, there's a lot of things that going on. You get some bizarre requests a lot of the time, but it's difficult.
What's the most bizarre request that you've had?
Player interviews.
Yeah, just loads of different ones. I mean, sometimes it depends on like players' form as well, like whether you can say yes or no. You'll get ones that are just wanting like maybe a fun chat with, say, like Joel or something like that, and then depending on the timing, obviously Livingston are going through a sticky patch at the minute. You can either say yes or no, but most of it's fine, to be fair.
For the women's side, sitting third in the table in SWPL 2 just now, would you say the season's going well as a whole?
Yeah, It's weird at the same time though, because we feel, I think, that our performances at times have been good, but not as good as what they can be. And I think going into the season at the start, I don't think we expected to be where we are in the league. But I think our next challenge is taking points off the top two teams, Kerry and Queen's Park. Queen's Park are doing really well at the minute, and Kerry aren't too far behind. But we've got a new manager in the summer, and he's brought in some players, and we seem to be finding consistency against teams lower in the league than us. So now it's just about taking points off teams higher in the league.
Yeah, you mentioned you started as a striker, have now transferred to the midfield role. Has that been difficult? Have you?
I played striker the past 2 seasons and had a decent goal scoring record, but I often found myself dropping in to receive the ball. So I'd asked about last season maybe playing the 10 role. I didn't get in there as much as I wanted to, but at the beginning of this season I've played there a couple of times and I quite like it. Getting on the ball more and kind of creating. It's more my game. But yeah, for me it's now about probably getting more game time and seeing what happens.
Yeah, has that been quite challenging, not getting as much game time as you would want?
Yeah, it has, but the team are picking up results. Although, I could say we're not at times playing as well as what we want to. But yeah, it's just about being patient and seeing.
And the goal still promotion this season?
Yeah, should we? Yeah. Although obviously just coming into the league, we want to be up there, and we don't see ourselves too far off Kerry at the minute. That would be a playoff spot. So yeah, we're still pushing for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Allison, in a couple of weeks' time we do have some Scotland duties to look forward to. They are away to Belgium and then home to England. What will Pedro Martinez-Losa be looking for from these games?
Yeah, I think realistically the Nations League campaign's gone. I would be amazed. I don't see Scotland taking maximum points from these 2 games. I think it was always going to be a very tough campaign given the magnitude and quality of opposition. I think you would want to see the foundations of good performances. I think it's been fairly sobering over the last few weeks. I don't think, other than that game at the Stadium of Light, the opening game against England, that second half performance, I don't think you've seen Scotland at their best. I think their hand is compromised by the loss of Caroline Weir. I think it's one of the few genuine world-class talents that you have within the squad, and it's also always going to be difficult to compensate for her loss. You're also without the likes of Emma Watson. I saw Sam Kerr started for Bayern Munich yesterday, which will be a huge plus for Scotland to have someone coming back in. But I think you just want to see better performances. I think you want to see a bit of fight and a bit of spirit about those displays, and then just see how that sets you up for the fresh campaign.
Yeah, what have you made of Scotland, Jen, for what we've seen?
I've not seen too much of them personally. I did watch the game against England. Obviously there's a big gulf there. England winning the Euros recently and doing so well in the World Cup. But yeah, second half they did compete better, which was good to see. And hopefully they can take confidence from that going into the next game against them.
Is that maybe been a struggle in their group, that the teams they're up against are a little bit above a little? Yeah,
but Scotland are improving. It's good to see a lot of players going down south, improving their game, and hopefully that's going to help the national team in the coming years.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, up at the weekend in the SWPL 1, on Wednesday night we have Glasgow City against Montrose, and then at the weekend it's Celtic take on Aberdeen, Hearts versus Hamilton, Dundee United face Glasgow City, Motherwell against Partick Thistle, Rangers will host Montrose, and Spartans take on Hibernian. Allison, for the top 3 in particular, especially Glasgow City, is it must win every game, every competitive game against each other, everyone else until the end of the season?
Yeah, and I think for Glasgow City, this Wednesday night against Montrose, I think it's really important that they just get back on it. I think they are expected to win that one fairly comfortable. I don't think you would anticipate Montrose giving them too many problems. It should be a fairly comfortable evening. It should be. You know, football doesn't work like that, but I think from Glasgow City's perspective, they'll want to start making up that ground. I think they know if they get a win, the table looks a wee bit easier on the eye, and then it's just a case of focusing on every game that's coming. But at the minute, I'm not sure if you see them shipping too many points out with the games against one another.
Yeah, and you don't want it to get to that stage, Jen, where you're almost relying on each other to drop points in order for you to be further up the table.
Yeah, that's where it gets difficult. You know, you need to pick up points when you play, and can't be relying on other teams dropping points. But yeah, still a long way to go. And you do expect, obviously, City to pick up a result against Montrose and a chance maybe to get a few goals and bring back that confidence again.
Yeah, Ali, is Rangers still your front runners?
I think so. I think they've been very quietly impressive. I really like Jo Potter. I think she comes across as a very knowledgeable coach. I think it's interesting you've got a female coach who's played at the very highest level and then transferring that over into the dugout. I think Rangers look like a different team this season. I think they look clinical. They carry a bit of menace about them. I think she's very calm. She's very consistent. I think at the minute they're the team to beat, and I wouldn't quite rule out Celtic just now either. I think Fran Alonso brought in an awful lot of players. They all seem to have gelled quickly. He's very good at that. I think every season he seems to be having to recalibrate the spine of his side and seems to do it successfully. I thought that was a big result for them last weekend to beat Glasgow City again. He spoke about how when he first came into Celtic, Glasgow City had this aura about them, the dominant team in the country, that there was an intimidation aspect, a mental aspect that he had to work on within his squad of breaking it down. I think that's long gone now. I think Celtic look as though they believe they've got the capabilities of going and challenging for the title, 2 minutes away from it last season. But I think for me, Rangers just have a slight edge at the minute. I think they're probably the best team in the league just now.
Yeah, Jen, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I would at the minute. They seem to have a good balance with younger players and experienced players at the minute at Rangers, and it's good to see young players getting the opportunity to play at that level and show what they can do.
They also had Jane Ross back in training this week. She's anticipated that she'll be back over the next couple of weeks. I think that's a huge boost for them. I think a very experienced striker, played at the very top level. I think to be able to bring that back in going into the second half of the season is vital.
And what I noticed last weekend at her press conference, Ali, was she had a great bond with Kirsty McLean, who was sitting next to her. That's great for girls to have that role model as a coach. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think she's young. Jo, it's only recently that she stopped playing, and I think to have that reference point of someone who's played at the very top level of international football, still very approachable, very accessible, and a good coach. I think what you've seen is she's made small tweaks to Rangers about how they set up, how they play from last term. They definitely, one of their downfalls last season was a failure just to finish games off, close games out, be clinical. A bit like what you're seeing just now with Glasgow City. I think she's addressed that. I think they've got goals in them. Interesting that her Rangers and Celtic, they're nip and tuck. I think there's a goal between them at the minute in terms of goal difference. 1 point and one goal. Yeah. I think definitely you're going to see a close title run in. Whether or not that transpires, it's just Celtic and Rangers with Glasgow City a bit off the pace is what it looks like just now. Whether or not they make up that ground, but I think there's very, very little between Rangers and Celtic just now. For me, I think Rangers have just got the edge.
Yeah, well, we would love to see another close run again between the top three. It makes it all more exciting. That brings us to the end of the Women's Show this week. On behalf of myself and Allison, thanks to Jen for joining us. We'll be back next week with some more action to look forward to. We'll see you then.
Thank you.